Today we're going to use a case study of South Lake Union to discuss community perceptions of character in a rapidly changing neighborhood. The guiding question that we used to inform our research was, how can a sense of community and character be fostered in the midst of rapid development? To fully understand our topic, it is important to know some background information about South Lake Union. Historically, SLU was mostly industrial. The Seattle Times described it as less a neighborhood than a patchwork of parking lots, warehouses, and low-slung industrial buildings. After construction began on the Amazon buildings, the neighborhood experienced rapid growth, which resulted in the homogeneous modern architecture that can be seen today. The architects and designers who worked on the new Amazon buildings created parklets and open spaces, which add variety, softness, and increase walkability of the neighborhood. The campus has 4 main privately owned public spaces, which are largely mixed as plazas and mid-block connections, in addition to a network of other semi-public plazas and open spaces. As of 2016, 36,000 people work in the neighborhood, which is almost a 50% jump since 2009, the year before Amazon relocated its headquarters here from Beacon Hill. Looking at these demographics, it is clear that while the density is even greater than that of the rest of Seattle, there are far fewer families. These graphics help to visualize the population living in SLU. The majority of the population is 20 to 44 years old, with a significant spike in individuals aged 25 to 34. Most people living in SLU have never been married, and out of the married couples, 51% have children aged younger than 6.
It is hard to overstate Amazon's corporate footprint in South Lake Union and the city of Seattle in general. The graphic on this slide demonstrates Amazon's footprint in Seattle. Amazon occupies a staggering 8.1 million square feet of office space in downtown and South Lake Union, which is more than the next 43 largest companies combined. This includes other large employers in Seattle, such as Facebook, UW, and Zillow, among others. In 2010, Amazon had 5,000 employees in the city of Seattle. Today, it has over 45,000, and the number continues to grow. When Amazon was first entering Seattle, the city upzoned and densified some areas of the city, most notably South Lake Union. As the housing market in Seattle has become strained, these upzones have served to relieve some of the pressure on the local housing market. One visit to South Lake Union and Amazon's overwhelming presence becomes obvious. Amazon, since beginning development in the area, has shown several attempts to cultivate a thriving neighborhood for their urban corporate campus. For example, Amazon rents out space to 24 restaurants and cafes, and keeps its company cafeterias small to encourage employees to go out into the neighborhood for lunch. The lease agreements even require restaurants to stay open late into the night in an attempt to create an active nightlife. However, business owners say South Lake Union can turn into a ghost town after work, and it is difficult for them to stay open late and still make a profit. Amazon's rapid development in South Lake Union has displaced lower-income individuals and several small local businesses, but Amazon says that they are taking steps to remediate this negative impact. For example, Amazon has let Mary's Place, a nonprofit homeless shelter, operate in South Lake Union for free since 2016. Although Mary's Place will soon come down to build more Amazon buildings, Amazon will gift the nonprofit 6 stories and a 47,000 square feet in one of their new buildings. Amazon has also pushed the city to install more cycling paths throughout the city and has funded the ones around its urban campus in South Lake Union. Since Amazon's arrival, the city has invested $668 million in infrastructure improvements, including a new streetcar line. Most of that money came from public funds, and many critics question if those funds could have been better spent elsewhere. Many argue that the attempts by Amazon and the city of Seattle have failed to create a vibrant, diverse neighborhood. So we set out to ask members of the community what they thought of South Lake Union and how they thought the community could be improved. In order to create an effective set of policies for South Lake Union aimed at creating a thriving, inviting community character, we wanted to talk to those who knew the neighborhood best. We had several guiding questions that we thought of as we formed our interview questions. For example, what constitutes character? Can you build your way into character? How have the local Hala upzones affected South Lake Union? What role can urban design play in improving South Lake Union? And what are the limits of urban design in improving a neighborhood? Can a sense of community be fostered even with a relatively high population turnover? And lastly, how can South Lake Union work with what it has to create a richer sense of community?
To get a better understanding of SLU, we walked to various locations in the neighborhood and interviewed people if they had time to spare in their day. Our interview started with some short yes or no questions that served as general demographic questions regarding age, occupation, and gender. Then we branched into open-ended discussion questions that sought to understand respondents' relationship with the neighborhood and their opinion of the neighborhood itself. In addition to our street interviews, we also conducted 2 phone interviews, one with an architect with Carbon Design and Architecture who lives in the neighborhood, and one with an urban designer with the Walker Macy design firm who used to work in the neighborhood. The responses to our questions are reflected in some of the policies we propose later in the presentation. We also went to a South Lake Union Community Council meeting on May 7th to get a better introduction to some of the issues facing the community at present, such as public safety and civic engagement. The demographics of our respondents seem to reflect the neighborhood as a whole, with one notable outlier. For the most part, not a lot of people actually live in South Lake Union. Only 22.2% of our respondents lived in the neighborhood, compared to 77.8% who commute from elsewhere. Our respondents were overwhelmingly young males, who made up 70.4% of our respondents. Only 29.6% of our respondents were female. This seems to reflect the general demographics of the tech industry that dominates SLU. Even though SLU is a tech hub, only 29.6% of our respondents worked for Amazon, although that is not to say that Amazon's influence is not prevalent throughout the neighborhood, as seen in the next slide. This word cloud is a composite of some of the words that our respondents used to describe SLU. Some of the most commonly used words were Amazon, business, tech, work, and youthful, which reflected the vibe of the neighborhood as a whole, given how Amazon owns a large percentage of the office space in SLU. The influence of Amazon is pervasive throughout the neighborhood. We observed many signs that indicated Amazon owned building or apartments for Amazon workers. Yet, there was a certain neighborhood element that was missing in SLU, one that cannot exactly be replicated by Amazon. These were some of the concerns that our respondents brought up during interviews.
People were generally aware of a lack of community feeling in South Lake Union. We asked what could be improved and what SLU is lacking. They noted that the main gathering places were bars and restaurants, and desired more places to hang out. Both residents and commuters also pointed out the heavy traffic in South Lake Union, and that one way to make their community better would be to improve it. In relation to that, residents would also like to see more green spaces. There's a large waterfront park in SLU that isn't highly used because of having to cross a busy street to get to it. People also mentioned that more businesses could influence the sense of community, because as of now, most places are chain restaurants. Rent prices were also noted as a determining factor of who is living in SLU. Most of the workers who we talked to said they would like to live here, but that rent was too expensive. More variety in rent cost would also help to bring a greater variety of people. One main flaw was a lack of family-friendly areas. There is no school, and the few facilities available are run down. However, not everybody had purely bad things to say. A few people mentioned the SLU block party and summertime night markets that sound interesting but underpublicized and with relatively low attendance. There's also an entire maritime community that is tied to the historic use of the area and puts on a wooden boat festival. One person specifically mentioned appreciating the signage denoting some of the Amazon mid-block cut-throughs as public-private space. They thought that this was a good step to actively acknowledging other people's right to use this space. Both Amazon workers and others alike both noted the large variety of nice restaurants, saying this is a reason they would take their friends to South Lake Union. Our respondents were also aware that while the architecture and the overall feel of the area is homogeneous, the people are not. South Lake Union has residents and workers from a broad range of cultures and backgrounds that many believe could make for a strong, unique community culture. So what does this mean for the future of South Lake Union and their planning approach going forward? Well, 44% of our respondents said that South Lake Union did have a distinct community character. Over half of those responses were that the character was business, work, or Amazon. Someone referred to the area as a college campus for adults, and another said that he travels to other parts of the city for his community activity, running, because South Lake Union does not have a running shoe store. As of now, SLU is the opposite of a bedroom community. It is an area that people go to for work, maybe have dinner with their friends, and then leave as soon as possible. Our results show that it is hard to force culture and community when this is just a stop along the road for most people, and in a few years they will move on to something else. What SLU needs to build community character is ultimately time. Time paired with residents that plan to stay and make the place their own. To do this, they need the resources to stay.
The first and most critical policy recommendation for South Lake Union is to keep Amazon families in South Lake Union, while also encouraging other young couples and families to move in. Currently, Amazon's young urban professionals may rightfully feel the need to relocate upon deciding to start a family. However, by effectively providing family needs, SLU can keep its workforce local and in turn foster the vibrancy and sense of community it needs. In the long run, Amazon workers alone represent a critical population that can grow into SLU when starting families, but by broadening the aim to move in non-Amazon families as well, particularly those who work in downtown Seattle, SLU can reduce its Amazon homogeneity while further fueling its transformation into a vibrant neighborhood for young urban couples. In order to do so, there must first be family-sized housing available in the area. This can be achieved by requiring developments to include a given percentage of family condos, such as a minimum of 20% two-bedroom units and so on. SLU must also provide family amenities such as a library, community and recreation center with sports and other activities, and additional daycares, which currently boast very low acceptance rates and long wait lists. In order to pay for the required services, density bonusing can be used, as it works well in tandem with policy number 3 that follows. Density bonusing is when developers can increase their development to a higher density by negotiating amenities that make the higher density more livable, such as, in this case, daycares. A family-friendly SLU will also require attention to children when designing public spaces. The city should include ample space for parents to take children, such as parks and play areas, as well as areas for older children to spend time in. Furthermore, the city should encourage more affordable family-friendly restaurants to move into SLU, as families will struggle to find a good fit in the concentration of bars and pricey fine dining establishments currently available. Following the positive feedback surrounding summer festivals, it is also recommended that there be more frequent weekend activities throughout the year, especially those catered to young families. Finally, a better connection to the Lake Union waterfront will in turn attract more people to the waterfront park, which is at present very underutilized. The second policy recommendation is for a narrow, preferably pedestrian-only, non-Amazon dominated street to be focused on for the creation of a vibrant main street with diverse shops of different sizes and types. The closest SLU has to such a street is the stretch of Westlake Street along the streetcar, though it is much too wide to result in the desired level of vitality. By requiring a certain allotment of small-sized retail space and banning minimum lease requirements, such as the frequently used 5-year minimum, we can ensure that larger, more established businesses are not being favored over local entrepreneurs. This will in turn allow for a more varied, vibrant retail landscape. These policies are not only useful for the main street, but across the neighborhood. The aforementioned policies will do little good if there is not enough population to sustain the desired level of activity. Amazon's efforts to keep businesses open late have not proved fruitful, as there are not enough people in SLU outside of working hours to keep the area alive. As such, the third policy recommendation is an increased focus on walkable and transit-oriented residential development, with zoning that balances densification and neighborhood capacity to curb astronomical housing prices, while also including provisions for affordable housing in an effort to increase the neighborhood's income diversity. Other recommendations for SLU include employing a city-at-eye-level mindset by filling urban voids with public art, requiring more variation in architecture away from the monotony of Amazon's developments, and embracing SLU's rich maritime history through weekend events, exhibitions, and the like. The transformation of SLU into a busy family neighborhood will not occur overnight, and many of the policies presented will need to be phased in accordance to the neighborhood's evolution. For instance, while the next step in the vision presented here is a public elementary school in SLU, it is difficult to suggest this as a policy until earlier policies create the need for it. It is also important to consider Amazon's interests in developing policies for SLU, as prescribing policies too unfavorable to them may cause a significant impact in the neighborhood and the city at large, such as through relocation of jobs, retaliatory policies, and so on. In conclusion, the goal of the policies presented has been to reshape South Lake Union's community character from a work-centric Amazon enclave to an area of diverse, family-friendly urban living. One thing is clear though, community character is not an overnight phenomenon, and while rapid development has transformed SLU, slow, incremental changes will solidify its character. Thank you for your attention. We now present 3 discussion questions to the class. 1. How can we foster inclusivity and social integration between Amazon and non-Amazon workers in SLU? 2. What are the risks of a neighborhood mostly catering to a single demographic? 3. Is there anything wrong with an enclave community that replenishes itself and remains demographically homogeneous, or should we push for diversity at all costs?